99.7 FM. And this morning we're having a conversation about education. We're focusing on prospective teachers because these are persons who are seeking to get into the system as teachers. And we're supposed to write an exam, licensure exam. Now, unfortunately, some 83.5% of persons who are actually resitting still failed. And that's generated a lot of conversation about, one, the quality of our education. You've asked the question, how come persons who are learning to teach fail, resit, and fail? You've asked the question also, is it a case of, getting, poor students into these colleges of education and the reason these students are failing? What if these students you're talking about, or these prospective teachers, were not actually from the colleges of education, or were persons who had gone to our universities wanting to be teachers and had failed? That notwithstanding, the most important thing is this. Yes, they will not be licensed to teach and posted by government, but what if they find themselves within the private sector, where all of us know we actually would pride ourselves as having persons who have learned how to teach in these schools? So in the midst of all of this, we say, let's have this conversation right here on the Super Morning Show. You'll be hearing from a teacher, you'll be hearing from a headmaster, and you'll be hearing from the President, Conference of Principals of Colleges of Education, Professor Samuel Atintono, who is the principal of the Accra College of Education, and the registrar of the National Teaching Council. They've been in the news recently. Christian Adaipoku, I'm sure many of you would know him from his activism days when he was a teacher. So they've joined us in studio as Dr. Christian Adaipoku and Professor Samuel Atintono. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Wisdom.
Hope you're doing very well.
Very good.
Great. So let's get into the conversation now. And before we get in studio, we want to start with Headmaster John and Emmanuel Aful, who is a practicing teacher. They've joined us on phone. They'll be sharing their thoughts with us before we get in studio and continue with the conversation. Headmaster John, good morning, and Emmanuel Aful, good morning.
Good morning, Winston.
So Headmaster John is a headmaster of a secondary school, and Emmanuel Aful is a practicing teacher, a trained teacher, so he would also be able to share his experience. Let me start off with you, Emmanuel Aful. And look, you've been complaining about the quality of education. You've said this has only exposed what has been in our system all this while. Tell us why you think this is only exposing the rots in our system.
Well, good morning, Winston. Good morning, Ghana. Before I say anything, let me issue this disclaimer. I speak not as an industry watcher, but I speak as someone who is in teaching.
Sure.
Indeed, I chose to become a teacher when I was in class 5. And so when I speak, I know what I'm talking about. Now, what we have today is a system which has actually made teaching or the teaching profession if you like, the last resort for some people, to the extent that now people decide on whatever they want to become, and when they are unsuccessful, they decide to be teachers. And this is one of the problems we have now. The system we're operating nowadays is actually due to certain factors, and I think that we need to take our time and talk about those factors well. The issue about 83 or so % people failing, prospective teachers, these are people who are supposed to have gone through pedagogical and content training from the colleges of education. And then there's the licensure exams trying to find out whether they were fit for a system. And this is what we have. I think that we need to be very careful about this because though the licensure exam is a good thing because it actually professionalizes the teaching career, it is something that has been placed at a wrong, if you like, footing, if I should say that word. For example, during our days, and I was in a training college called Seda School, as a training college from 1991 to 1994.
Okay.
Now, then you would only go after O level. So you got your sixes, at least 6 in all 6 subjects, and then you gain entry. Now, once you get in, there was usually an internal exam organized by the school itself to make sure whether you are actually fit to be trained as a teacher. Now, mind you, in the College of Education itself, we have what we call the pedagogical training and the content training of the various subjects that you would come out to teach, ideally. So I was particularly interested in English, so that was it. Now, Winston, one interesting thing happened in 1992. This is the second year, almost the second year, and there's a policy direction from the Ministry of Education to the extent that all those who didn't have passes...
Headmaster John.
Yes. Hello?
Headmaster John, we can hear you, so if you could...
This is Emmanuel.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Emmanuel, please continue.
Yes, so there was a policy statement that came from the ministry saying that all those teachers in the College of Education who didn't have effective passes in English or math should be screened out of the system. Unfortunately, it caught me because I didn't do too well in math. I think I had a 7 or so. Then 7 would be 43, 45, thereabout. But it was good enough to take me to the College of Education. But as to whether it would allow me to become a teacher, a trained teacher, that was what the policy actually targeted. So this information is verifiable. Anybody who was in the College of Education from 1991, then there were 38 of them in the country. Anybody who was in any of these training colleges in 1991, 1992 could attest to this, that all those who didn't have English or math were actually supposed to be affected.
Okay.
Now, instead of throwing away the baby with the bathwater, there was an intervention that came. An intervention added that we would be asked to teach primary school children, so that upon graduation from the College of Education successfully, instead of being posted to secondary schools and JHSs, then you would be a primary school teacher, which for me was a great thing. Because if you didn't have math or you didn't have English, what business do you have going to do in a JHS or an SHS classroom? Then luckily, there was a paradigm shift. We were trying to phase out that same year, we were trying to phase out all people teachers in the system. And so it meant that if you had gone to the training college and you had received a training to become a teacher, you would be posted to replace a pupil teacher somewhere. And it made a lot of sense. So I, for instance, started my training, my teaching experience in 1994. And I was posted to a primary school at some place. And so on my certificate as a teacher then, it had 3-year post-medical, because then my math was not that good. But I still qualified to teach because I had satisfied all the conditions supposed to have been organized by the College of Education. Okay. And this is what we have missed. Currently, what we have is that once you get your success, the passes in the same subject, and you go to the College of Education, that's it. These students who failed, these prospective students who failed these licensure exams or this licensure exams have gone through pedagogical training. Now, pedagogical training has to do with teaching methods. It is not the content itself. And I just want to clarify this. For example, I teach English, so if you were asked to go and teach verbs, pedagogically, you have to be trained on how to deliver the teaching of verbs. And then there is a content. So at every material point in time, there are 2 things you need to know. So if you take mathematics, you need to learn the content, you need to learn the pedagogy.
Okay.
And so my assumption is that these people who have left the training colleges and have failed in licensure are people who have been trained pedagogically, but not necessarily content-wise. And so this is where I am at. A suggestion I can make is that why don't you go back to a system as we had in those days, where universities would conduct FUEs, first university exams, for all students who were desirous of reading a particular program in a university.
Hold on a minute for me, Mr. Afu. Let me get to Headmaster John. He's a headmaster. He engages teachers all the time, and I know he also has some few thoughts to share on this before I get in studio. Headmaster John, so you've been engaging these teachers, okay, even at the secondary school level. What are your own concerns?
Right. Listen, let me take this opportunity to greet your panelists in the studio, especially to Christian and Eric Okudok.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, the issue at stake, my brother, is herculean, and we have to look at it. I remember 2018 when teachers were recruited into the system because we had this double, some years the double track system.
Yeah.
And there were some who came along with certificate in forestry, certificate in biodiversity, certificate in fisheries, and what have you, who were brought in that we should recruit them into the secondary, education so that they would teach. What I did was I said, look, this is not what I needed. You may have the degree, all right, but the requisite degree for you to teach, just in biology, maybe you have done biodiversity and forestry and other things. This is not your field. So I even milited on their letters to be sent to the regional offices so that they will repost them. Unfortunately, I was called to Accra because I was, becoming a stumbling block to those who wanted to teach, all because they didn't do the subjects that I requested for. Fast forward to this one. You see, listen, we were in training college. It was training college. And my brother, who was just, on the line, indicated that maybe after O-level you could go. No, even some even joined from sixth form. Some people came from the sixth form to PS1. Let me put it down. That was how we refer to it. PS1. PS1 to PS2 is 1 year. You are doing 3-year program. PS1 to PS2 is 1 year. Before you get settled in PS2, you have written part 1.
Okay.
You have written part 1, 6 subjects. And these 6 subjects, some were, if you couldn't get your passes, either you were referred or some were asked to, withdraw when they were in second year. So the system itself will set the child out. Before you get to PS3, then you write part 2. Part 2, if you write part 2 includes your electives. If you don't make it, you don't get your certificate, you don't get your registered number. You go to the field, you don't have registered number. And it was something that was, the system cured itself from some of these chaps that we are talking about. My brother, Mr. Agbo, Emmanuel Agbo was saying that the pedagogical areas. Yes, it's methods. For me, when I was there, I didn't like math. Mathematics is something I didn't like. But people were doing content and I was afraid. But all that I did was to go by the methodologies. Finaman, a writer from Standard School, I believe, I remember that name very well. I digested this book. A-level students who did mathematics were always burning their heads in, content and everything. But the question is, how do you teach whatever content you have?
Okay.
And surprisingly, when results came, some of us who were math phobia, let me put it that way, we were able to sail through. And those who did content were failed. Not because they didn't know math, but because they couldn't know how to teach it. So, my brother, training college, when it became College of Education, things have really changed completely. Now, I remember we were writing on A4 sheets, plain sheets. Why? When you ask, they will tell you are going to write on the board. So if you write on the A4 sheet or the plain sheet and it tilts downwards or upwards, then it means on the board, if you are writing, that is the way it will look like. So train yourself. Today, what do you see?
Hold on a minute for me. Let me get in studio and say that this morning, you just heard from Headmaster John, who's headmaster of a secondary school, and Emmanuel Afo, who is a practicing teacher. In studio, Dr. Christian Adepoku, who is the registrar of the National Teaching Council, and Samuel Atintono, who is principal, Accra College of Education, and president of the Conference of Principals of Colleges of Education. We're having this all-important conversation about our educational sector, particularly following the failure of some 83.5% of prospective teachers. Professor Atintono, let me start off with you. So you've heard them. You train the teachers, prospective teachers. They've called into question the structure that we implement currently. What do you say about that?
First of all, good morning to your cherished listeners, particularly to my 46 principals who will be listening at this time in Accra College of Education, and of course to registrar here. He's the only registrar in Ghana, Dr. Adepoku.
Others will not be happy with that.
So, and then to thank the headmaster and then the teacher for the input that they have made, and to assure them, of course, myself, I completed college in 1991, so I'm very familiar with the part 1, part 2, the fact that you have to train a teacher, content and pedagogy. But there have been a lot of changes, and that is because globally, teaching is a profession. The education sector itself have seen some transformations. So from 2008, if you recall, they changed all the certificate programs in the colleges to a diploma. And by 2012, there was an act converting them to tertiary education because we were doing it on a GS. Yeah. That was pre-tertiary. So the content changed. That's the training process, because if you're training a diploma versus a certificate is different. But of course, you still have all the key things that you need to train a teacher. You have to do content versus pedagogy. That's the methods of teaching, which they have indicated here. Let me assure people that the quality of that diploma program didn't compromise what people probably anticipated. By 2018, we've now converted the training programs in the College of Education to degree, 4-year Bachelor of Degree program. And what that meant is that it now have specialization in early childhood, primary, and then junior high specialization. I think the issue that we're addressing here, that I want to tell people, let us not be so much worried. It is not the case that the quality of training in the College of Education has decreased. The particular student that we are talking about who failed these exams, and I want to emphasize, are not the students from the College of Education. They are not the regular ones. And the registrar is here, and he made that point clear when he even presented reports that these category of students are people who over the years, since they started the licensure exam in 2018 to date, that accumulated to about 8,000. Some usually, in any professional exam, some will write, pass, some will fail. So, but you have got the opportunity to do. The only good news and bad news is, per this kind of exams, you keep writing until you probably pass. But unfortunately, normally in some professional examinations, they give a cap. UCC that the colleges were all affiliated to, what they did at the time was that if you graduate from the college and you never pass even the college exam, they give you 3 times. If you don't pass, then there's a problem. You may have to then just leave it like that.
This one, how many times are they given? 1 minute, Doctor?
There's no cap.
There's no cap.
So you try and try until you pass.
Exactly. So, but this is the issue. I think that the licensure exam is now in and provides a check for prospective teachers, because you can't even go into the classroom if you don't pass it. In the past, even if you didn't pass the College of Education certificate, they would have posted you into the classroom. That's what was happening. So for me, this is a very good thing that licensure have come to provide a gateway or a sieve that until you do the things that you should do as a teacher and demonstrate those skills to us that you can pass. And what are they? These essential skills, literacy and numeracy.
Yes, but hold on a minute on that.
Yeah.
You can't go to the classroom.
Yeah.
Yes, you won't be posted.
Yes.
What about if you find yourself in a private school?
Well, you should agree that private school most of them don't even take professional teachers.
Well, some do these days. In fact,
some do. So
when they see the professional teachers, they're excited because the fact that this is somebody who's learned how to teach.
Very good.
And so you actually would say, this man has learned the pedagogy and content and everything, he's going to be a better teacher, all things being equal, within the shortest possible time than one without professional
Very
education.
good. But they are aware that they ought to have a license. So if you're a private school proprietor, you ought to check. Has this teacher that you are going to engage passed the license exams? So that one, you should check. And if the person have not passed and you want a professional teacher, clearly there's no reason why you should pick the person.
Let me bring Christina Daipoko in at this moment. So you are the registrar, you know this more. For the students who have been resitting, do you know, for instance, the number that are from colleges of education, number that are from other universities, or those who are willing to teach and thus must pass before they sit the exam?
Yeah, thank you very much, Winston. Yes, we have the numbers. Unfortunately, I don't have them here. But what I remember very well, I think I was on a similar program with Prof 3 days ago, and I showed him the statistics. We did from 2019 to 2022 average failure, and realized that at the College of Education level, we had only 26% failure cumulatively.
26%.
26%. But if you look at the others, we're having some of them going as far as 65% failure cumulatively in the past 4 years. And so that is how the numbers look like. We have been able to arrange from college to college, university to university. If you want to know the cumulative failure on the part of UCC, I think it's around 47%. If you look at
47% from UCC.
Yes. If you look at
the university established to train teachers.
Yes, UW is around 45%, and it goes on like that. I don't have the full data here, but I still remember these three.
That's worrying. The university established to train teachers.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Which is?
Let me add that the colleges run a curriculum that's different from the universities. And ours is specifically to train the teachers. And we tie all the things we do in there with what we call the National Teacher Standards. So before a tutor can go into the class, you ought to have all these things known. So we are running separate programs.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah.
If you go to UCC, there are Bachelor of Education programs.
Yeah, sure.
And in these Bachelor of Education programs, there is teaching English, for instance. So teaching mathematics, teaching French. And you'll be told what you must learn as a teacher who wants to teach English. Okay, so if you're a teacher who wants to teach English, there are certain programs that you must follow.
Yeah.
Because the belief is that if you go through that system, you'd be a better teacher. And you do the general pedagogy. I mean, you learn these things. I mean, I went to UC, so I saw people studying
your alma mater.
Yes, and so I'll be surprised. And that's why I express a surprise. We'll come back and continue with this. We'll come back and continue with this all-important conversation, because we need to understand why they're failing. If the University of Cape Coast, tasked with training teachers, University of Education Winneba, that took over from the University of Cape Coast, tasked with the training of teachers, are presented 47% and 45%. There's a problem.
Your morning radio.
This is the Super Morning Show here on Joy 99.7 FM. My name's Enima Enimado, and we're having a conversation about teachers, the kind of teachers that we're producing, why they're not doing so great at the examination and the licensing process, and how hopefully we can change that or make it better. Joining me, I have Headmaster John Enimano Aful, who's a teacher, on the phone lines, and in studio, Dr. Christina Daipoko, the Registrar for the National Teaching Council, and Professor Samuel Atintono, who's the principal of Accra College of Education and President, Conference of Principals of Colleges of Education. So just before we went on the break, and let me start with you, Professor Atintono, we were comparing the percentage of failures, UCC, Winneba, College of Education, and I think we agreed that the College of Education was doing better.
Yeah.
So failure rate was 26% as opposed to 47-45 for the universities. Why is it so? Why are the universities not, as it were, producing teachers who are able to pass this exam?
I think the critical thing is the curriculum that we run. The colleges of education curriculum is specially prepared to train the teachers for the basic level. And we ensure that the content and the pedagogy that we do really fit into these kind of programs. Again, recall that NTC, together with the stakeholders, Ministry of Education, GTEC, GS, prepared a policy document which they call the National Teacher Standards, of which any training institution that's training teachers will have to fit their program into this kind of a policy framework. Luckily for us in the colleges, whatever we do, our curriculum allows us to make reference to this document. But for the universities, largely they are running their own teacher training programs, which sometimes doesn't tie in with this kind of a framework.
Why?
And I think there have been calls that they need to review, because if we're training for the same basic level, we should all be expected to run the same kind of a similar curriculum. So somehow that is part of their problem. But a critical part of their work that we have also seen is the fact that most of them run distance education programs, and some of these students are not actually very effective in terms of the learning process. So that affects their output as well.
Okay.
They as a university may have to take a second look as to how they do this training. I would also add that if you come to the College of Education, a critical component is numbers. They are not really, we don't have large class size. A maximum you see, even if you have 100 or 200 in a particular level, you will again have them in smaller groups to teach. So contact and what I will do turns out to be very, very effective compared to what happens in some of the regular universities programs.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Daipo, do you think that it's more of the fact that the licensure exam is almost built to fit the
Colleges.
the colleges as opposed to the universities? Because content is content, right? And pedagogy is pedagogy. So why does there seem to be such a large gap between those who are able to pass and those who are able to fail in terms of where they go to school?
I think it's, for me, I slightly disagree with Prof on the content, because we as a nation agreed on a specific document we call National Teacher Education Curriculum Framework, which Prof, that is colleges, the universities all sat down to write. And it is that document that everybody is developing his or her curriculum from. And so it's expected that if they conform to that curriculum, then there shouldn't be marked disparities. But I think the crux is the second aspect that Prof spoke about, the quality of people that are admitted into the universities and the colleges. Yes, the colleges, the minimum is 36, grade 36, just like any university. But the difference between the colleges and the universities is that they are still a bit rigorous in selecting, and they are quite selective a bit. But when it comes to the universities have two main cohorts of trainees. They have the regular students, and then they have the distance. Usually the regular students are taken through the normal admission processes of minimum of 36 grade to be able to get into the university. But when it comes to the distance, I think this thing is relaxed a bit. They give more room for mature students and so on and so forth, and it's creating a whole lot of problems. Because if you look at the licensure examination that is being written now, averagely, in fact, when we started licensure, the first year, we didn't restrict the distance to only teachers. And I can tell you that few people were able to pass at least two. The minimum, the numeracy and literacy. People who had not done education were able to pass the numeracy and literacy.
So that's content.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so irrespective of where you are coming from, whether you are coming from the traditional college of education or you are coming from a university, literacy and numeracy, you should pass. It is the essential professional skills that's really about methodology and other things that probably you may find yourself wanting. Now, even that, I don't expect a regular student from a University of Cape Coast or the University of Education, UNIBA, or any other university in Ghana to fail that pedagogical aspect if the person has really gone through the training appropriately. For me, the focus should be on the quality that we bring into the institution, because the difference here also is that, as Prof indicated, the colleges have small class sizes, and normally they don't do lecturing, they really teach. The colleges really teach. But the university, nobody will have the time to wait for you.
Really,
and they will take you to the normal university speed, and then you come out. And so if you are not already a good student, you are likely to lag behind. And they tend to flunk a lot in the exam.
Prof, I understand that this may not have been your decision, so you can't really answer the why, but I want you to speak to it. Why is it that? So for medicine, somebody who had aggregate 36 will not get in. For law, they won't get in. For engineering, they won't get in. So why is it that for an area that is so important, because this is the future generation, we're trusting the future of our country and the future of our citizens into this group of people to teach and to train. Why is the aggregate 36 in the first place? Because what happens then is that it becomes a third choice. I mean, if I don't do well, I can go and cheat, I can go and teach. If I don't do well, I can. But do we not value what it is to teach?
I think let me make it clear that even in the universities, those professions you are mentioning, the policy direction from the Ministry of Education is that the minimum qualification to enter university or colleges is aggregate 36. What then happens when we have to say aggregate 10-8 is the fact that there's competition. And you'd notice that today, even in medicine, they have what they call fee paying. So if
non-fee paying. Yes.
It's all because you, by policy, you qualify. But because there's competition, you cannot get admitted. I give you an example of Accra College of Education. Last year, we received as many as 3,000 applicants. But for lack of space to accommodate them, when we pegged it, even at aggregate 10, we got more than what we wanted. Because we could only admit a maximum of 300. So by aggregate 10, we have gotten over 400 people.
On one hand, that's good. So you're getting quality
exactly.
students.
So then you ask it, if you have the minimum qualification, you can come. So if we tell our cut-off point, in fact, I think for females we went up to 14 or 12, but even there, we still had problems. So it doesn't mean that the people didn't qualify, but because there's lack of space. That's where the cut-off points are coming. And we must also bear in mind that it is true that maybe the applicant who gets aggregate 36, naturally we would assume that he or she is not the best. But there are some other intervening factors, including the school that the applicant attended. These are all, they can contribute. You might be good, but if where the SHS you are coming from is not like Presec, but some other rural place, you can understand this kind of dynamic. So we also, in admitting, take care. And as I said, we are very vigorous in our selecting processes to ensure that we do not train teachers who are not of the quality that we want. So don't be so much worried. In any case, as a training institution, part of our role is to make sure that if we have recruited students, we should improve their skills and concepts. So it is within us to see how the weak student, the average student, and the best student can all be. And these things are all part of the colleges of education training programs. In fact, even the teachers, that's the lecturers that we recruit, we have to be sure you yourself who's coming to teach have all that we require. Because you might have been a teacher, you should have done all the pedagogy and the content in whatever discipline area you are. Somehow, in the universities today, it is not the case that all the lecturers with PhDs have actually gone for training to teach. That we should also note at the background.
But also by virtue of the fact that you can only take 300, 400 people, it's almost like selection.
Exactly.
What's the call? Yeah, it's like, okay, we get
very
the best.
competitive.
And then, the universities are bigger so that they can take. So what do you think that the universities have to do then? Since they are able to take people who didn't do as well, so that they match up, because 45%, taking the exam are failing. Obviously, there's something very, very wrong in the way that they're teaching.
I think at this point, let me indicate that because I'm sure universities are also listening. The colleges are actually affiliated to these universities that we are talking about. University of Cape Coast, University of Ghana, where my college is affiliated to, KNUST, EW, and then UDS. We're actually affiliated to them. But he mentioned something that he disagreed. That is the registrar with me on the curriculum. And I think the fact is that the national teaching curriculum, that's a framework that we are all supposed to design our curriculum within. Truth of the matter is that the universities, they have not yet still tied all their teaching curriculums to that national framework. And that's what the problem is.
Can you tell us why, Christian? Why are the universities? I mean, it seems the obvious thing to do, isn't it?
Yes, the obvious thing to do. And universities are autonomous to some extent. It's now that National Teaching Council has been given the mandate from 2020 to start regulating teacher education institutions.
Okay.
Before that time, as an autonomous institution, we've given you a framework. You design your own curriculum to suit it. And nobody was really checking.
Yeah.
But now there is a mandate for
The
somebody.
fundamentals are exposing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is somebody who is there to check, to make sure that you conform. And I believe most of them have started changing their systems to conform to the new curriculum framework, so that some of these things, these flaws, may be avoided. And you asked a question about what can they do. If the first thing is, if you diagnose and you realize that your candidate is not good at English, what you do is that you organize extra classes for that person. You have admitted the person. Maybe English for as a second language for people who are weak in English would do, whilst they're pursuing the degree program. Alongside it, they do this one, so that by the time they come out, they're good at it. If it is numeracy, that's a challenge. You can do the same thing for them. And that is why over time now, we have been advocating that there should be entrance examination to check some of these things.
Okay. So apart from the regular exams, WASI and all of that, you want specific entrance examination.
Exactly. So you pass that entrance examination, and even if, I'm just making a drawing hypothesis, assuming that you have written the exam, you were not successful in literacy, and the university still decides to take you, the university takes you with the knowledge that this candidate I'm taking is not good at literacy. So I'm going to have introduce maybe English 101 for this candidate to be able to catch up with the standard that we all need. But that is not the case now. It's assumed that you have your normal university qualification, and therefore you enter and you go through it as quickly as you can as any other candidate. No selection, no segregation to find out those who are weak and therefore need special attention and so on. So when you come out and you are confronted with the licensure examination, it becomes a challenge. So maybe some of these things are the things we should be looking at. We've been talking about it. Prinkov, NTC, the universities, the ministry have all been talking about looking at the entry requirement again and trying to see if we could do something to sieve them before they enter.
And
the problem is, yes, we're talking about two things here. If they can be tested in numeracy and literacy before they enter. When you are hesitant, you don't write numeracy and literacy again. You just test you on the content knowledge, that is your area of specialization, and probably pedagogy. That will be the takeaway for you.
Yeah.
The challenge here is that if we decide to do the entrance exam, then the advantage rather is that you will not get a candidate to spend all the time 4 years, get to the finishing point, and be told that you are not literate enough to be able to communicate in class, or you are not numerate enough to be able to do analysis of common numbers and so on, and therefore you cannot pass into the classroom. So we curtail that expenditure both on the part of government and on the part of parents and candidates. Because if you are going through the mainstream College of Education, government is spending on you. And so if you spend the 4 years and you come out and you are not able to enter the classroom, it's a cost to the taxpayer.
It is.
If you are going through the university system, government is not spending on you directly in terms of what fees you pay. But then your parents are spending on you, or you're spending on yourself to be able to go through the course. And you finish, and then we tell you that you could not pass through the gate. It becomes a challenge. So as much as possible, we should be able to reduce the margin of failure by first checking it at the entrance of the institution. And when we are able to do that, by the time they get to the exit point, we have very, very minimal failure in the
Great.
licensure.
Because
Yeah.
what happens if they do it at the beginning is that then if they don't pass, they can resit. So at that point, they can go, they know that, okay, literacy is my problem. So let me focus on that, work on it for another year or so, resit. And then, I mean, some may say it's the same resitting before, resitting after. Doesn't really matter. But what are your thoughts, Prof?
I think we're looking at solutions and the way to improve it. And as I said, we are open to how we can probably screen them at the entry point. It's very critical, because if you don't get the right caliber of students, you can have problems. Recall that one of the contributors, I think teacher Ima, raised the issue that, and I wanted to actually address that the teachers that we have today, they come in as a last resort.
Yeah.
Let me say that it is not the case, but there are a few who do that. But what we are witnessing today, and I think I'm happy as a college principal, is you have a very youthful population entering the teaching profession. And part of the training these days has also changed in terms of the practical thing that we do to ensure that if you enter year one of the things people don't want to teach, you have to expose them to the classroom. And we do that the first year from first semester till the exit. We'll begin to monitor to see who actually have interest and who doesn't. And we can provide the kind of counseling to them. It's true, because sometimes they are stereotyped, teaching profession doesn't get you money, teaching profession doesn't take it, and all these things, the youth, you know how they can think about. We have built-in mechanism to deal with that one. So perhaps in addition to what he's saying, even if we are screening and say, okay, entrance exam, we can think through how vigorous that entrance exam can provide the measurement to say, okay, if you pass it, then you don't need this kind of thing. But critically is also the fact that if you look at the colleges, if we admit you year one, even though you are supposed to be a specialized teacher, we ensure that we teach you all the essentials or the basic things. You need to still know literacy. You need to still know how to write as a teacher. You need to have a fair idea about the essential thing of being a teacher, professional skills. So year one is meant for that one. Then by the time they get to specialization, they're actually equipped and know what they are going to do. So for me, in the university, as I said, I have been there as a lecturer. Part of the problem we don't have is we pluck you year one, straight away you are doing your specialization in mathematics, science, and so on. Of course, they have general courses in education and so on that they teach. But I think that we ought to also have that kind of arrangement where you can teach people these essential things while they're in school.
Yeah.
And also check our admission protocols, the entry behavior.
So it sounds really good. I mean, I know that the College of Education is doing much better, but there's still 26% failing the exam. So the 26% who are failing, they've gone through the first year of, all the generals, and then why are they still failing? An exam which they are prepared for, because you prepare them for the exam, right?
Yeah. Not necessarily for only the exam. What we do is the training is very holistic. We prepare you for the content to teach, the pedagogy and so on. But in any profession, you don't expect 100% to pass. That will also be an indictment. If there are exams were showing that everybody was passing, I think we'll have to ask NTC what kind of exam it is. So examination is supposed to also discriminate, to demonstrate certain skills. You have a certain threshold. Of course, we're not happy that we're having 26%, with ways that we have 10%. What we want to do, of course, also with NTC, they took the lead in conducting research to get all this database for us. We should think that we need to take a deep dive into these people who are failing, what exactly is contributing to it. Because at the moment, we rely on informal kind of information, but we don't have a research base to say, why are these students failing? But for me, as a college principal, I don't also expect all my students to pass. In a particular year, all the colleges put together, 46 colleges, we may turn out about 20,000. So if you turn out about 20,000, you have 15,000, 16,000, or even sometimes 8,000. That's quite a good
it's quite a good
exactly.
turn. But I want to talk about those who are resitting. So when somebody, for example, Christian, has gone through the exam and they've resat, as it were, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times, like, 1, what exactly is the problem? And 2, when they finally pass, what kind of teacher have we gotten ourselves? A teacher who can, do we holistically look at it, oh, you failed so many times that maybe you can connect with the children who don't do so well? Like, I mean, I just don't understand.
Okay. Let me say that per the definition of NTC, to say you have passed means that you should have passed all the 3 subjects.
Okay.
Literacy, numeracy, and essential skills. So if a candidate has been failing essential professional skills 9 times, the assumption is that the candidate has been good in literacy and numeracy, but weak in essential professional skills. So you go for further studies, maybe you read more, you polish yourself, and then if you come and you pass, then it means you are now whole enough to be able to deliver. So failing doesn't mean that they failed all the 3 subjects. They may be weak in one subject, and it's normal. 9
times?
Well, it depends. I will not defend them, and I think it's clear that the moment you pass 4 times and you are not passing, the tendency that you will never pass is there.
It's very high.
Only few people are able to make it after that. So the suggestion coming out, in fact, the board of the NTC has really considered it. That, in fact, the last time we did this presentation to them, they were so mad, and they are considering a cap on the number of times one can write, because sometimes we are just wasting the candidate's time. Probably they have other specialties, they have other skills they can exploit somewhere else, but we keep giving them the hope that they could still be teachers. They could
still be teachers,
but they may not necessarily be teachers. So we put a cap on it. As Prof said, UCC that used to do all these things for us over the years before the advent of NTC will not allow you to go beyond 4 times. And so with NTC coming in, we don't see why we should not continue that trend, and to make sure that we put a cap on it and will not continue to waste other people's time on continuously writing and not passing. And when that happens it puts pressure on everybody, because the candidate becomes more and more desperate to pass, and they want to use any means
necessary.
Yeah, sometimes they can even be very aggressive, trying to make sure that they pass. Why should I write exam 4, 5, 8 times, 10 times I will not pass? So we are learning a lot from some of these things, and the reforms that are coming, it's enshrined in that one, that we should make sure that there should be a cap. There's a cap on the number of times somebody can write the licensure exam.
Right. Prof, I think Winston may have touched on this, but he was talking about those who don't get posted by the government, but then find themselves in the private sector. And you mentioned that, some of the private schools would be happy to say, you're licensed, and so as it were, your value has gone up. Is there a way that for example, how many times or how long it took a teacher to pass? And does that affect, do you think, from an employer's point of view, the value of the teacher that is coming in? And then also from an employer's point of view, private schools, is it going to cost more to have a licensed teacher? Is the licensure, apart from the fact that it's supposed to sieve out, those who are not great, is it also a way of placing a lot more value on teachers? Because we know that in the past, teaching is not something that has been, as celebrated as it should have been. So do you think that's also something that it could?
I think it is true that now that we are beginning to look at teaching from a very serious professional point, in the sense that the licensure have actually demonstrated that if you even go through training, you have a certificate, and you haven't passed it, you cannot be recruited. And I think I'm happy Ghana Education Service has made that a very good point. If you don't pass, you can't even apply. The same thing to the private schools, and NTC has taken steps further to even train the teachers in the private school, because the very framework or the policy that they work with says that you cannot actually even teach if you don't have any form of a kind of approval from them. So they have the licensure, they can grant the temporary one, but they're also taking steps. I think the work is so much for them, but I've seen that they have done that even in my college. Some private school teachers have been brought into the college to give them some basic kind of training and giving temporary license. In fact, even national service, they have been doing that. So what it then means is that there's actually value added to the teaching profession now, and people are beginning to sit up. In fact, beyond even getting your license, it is not kind of for life. If you get a license 2-3 years, you are required to go and demonstrate certain skills again for renewal. That's what it meant. So even those who are passed have to demonstrate that you are in the classroom. So you must come back again and tell us that you have been doing lifelong learning, professional development as you are there, then demonstrate. And there are certain points, and again, there are some institutions that are providing that training. You have to register with NTC. Of course, my college is one where we can do some training again to do teachers too.
But are we enforcing it? Are we able to enforce that a teacher was licensed 3 years ago and it's time for him to be reassessed? Do we have the database? Do we have the people? Do we have the... Because otherwise it's just another policy that sounds good on paper.
No, they are enforcing it. Usually, when you start some of these things, initially have problems and they say no need to have a work for NTC. But every teacher now in the classroom is supposed to build what they call a professional portfolio and this lifelong thing. Also participating in a professional development. Remember, 2-3 years ago, I remember even the Minister of Education, there's a money, some amount that they allocated for that purpose. Yeah. So they're supposed to use it to pay to get things done. And their promotion is actually also tied to that. If you don't demonstrate those things, you cannot be promoted. So it's being enforced.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes, the enforcement has been slightly slow because it's a new thing. As I indicated, NTC really got the power to be able to enforce some of these things in 2020. And we have started across the country. We have licensed almost every teacher in Ghana. About 350,000 teachers have been registered across the country. They are going through continuous professional development and so on to be able to merit renewal of license and other things. Besides that, the private schools too, we are aware that we have a lot of them who have challenges with their qualification and so on. But then, NTC has taken steps so far to be able to get them licensed. What we are doing is that currently, we are registering all private school teachers across the country. And then, as we are registering them, those who qualify for professional license, we give them. And those who do not qualify, we give them training as Prof indicated. And then we give them temporary license. Temporary license is valid for 1 year and is renewable 2 more years. After the 2 years, that is when you have held a license for 3 years, if you have not made any effort towards professionalizing yourself and becoming a licensed teacher, you cannot continue to teach.
Okay.
Let me also say that the minimum qualification to teach in Ghana, whether public or private in Ghana, the minimum authorization to teach, the basic one, is teacher's license, either a temporary license or a permanent license. And the license is issued by the National Teaching Council. And that is what we have started working on. It's a gradual process, but I believe that by next year, we are hitting into enforcement. We'll be moving from school to school. We go to the school, we check. What the law says that if you employ somebody who is not licensed, you are liable.
Right, okay.
And then the person who is also practicing teaching without license is also liable.
Okay.
And so from next year, we'll be moving from school to school. We'll be doing enforcement. We'll be supporting people who need support to be able to get to the required standard and so on. That is what we really want to do. We want to first support people to be able to conform. And when people become more resistant and recalcitrant, there and then that you start enforcing.
Okay.
That's what we are working on. And these are all geared towards making sure that we get the right caliber of teachers in the classrooms. Because if you get the teacher factor right, you have solved about 60% of your educational problems. And that is why it's so important that occasionally we review the system, put in more measures to make sure that we move on well. The whole world, one thing that is constant is change. And so when the teacher reforms start coming, we meet resistance, but it's understood because change management is so tough and people don't just absorb changes like that. It takes time. It takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of evidence building to prove to people that, yes, what I'm bringing is the right thing for everybody. And that is what we are doing. The quality of people in a country cannot be better than the quality of its education.
Yeah.
And the quality of education of a country cannot be better than the quality of its teachers. And so getting the teachers factor right is so important. And globally, that is what we are all doing. AU has declared 2024 as the year of education. And the focus is so much on the teacher. Because if you improve the teacher's bit, learners benefit a lot. And when learners benefit a lot, you improve society.
Yeah.
UNESCO says that since war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that we construct defenses for peace. And so if you can run a peaceful society, you can run a peaceful country that is developing, then you must start with the construction of the mindset of the people. And that starts from the younger generation, start from the education system. And that is why some of these things have been done. We are receiving a lot of backlash, but we are not that much perturbed. Insofar as we are supporting people and we are helping to sanitize the system such that every parent will be so confident that this teacher that I'm sending my child to teach will be able to communicate effectively to that child, and that child will be able to reverse it and also communicate effectively to the teacher, to the comprehension of both. If the teacher is not able to do that, why do you want me to put my child in the hand of that teacher?
Yeah.
At all. It shouldn't happen. And so Ghanaians should have confidence in the National Teaching Council and what we are doing. It's hurting a lot of people, and we are aware. Somebody has spent a number of years in a school and is desperate to go and teach. But let's put the sentiments aside. The desperation of people to enter classrooms should be put aside. Rather focus on the learner, the innocent child who has very little to say in who or she, he or she that handles that child. And that is why some of these things are so important to us. We appreciate the work that the teacher education institutions are doing. They are doing marvelous job. But to some extent, we still need to look at it policy-wise. We need to look at how people are given the opportunity to enter the system.
Yeah.
And when that one is resolved, then we go into the stuff that is given to people when they enter the system before they come out. Then we all have confidence that our classrooms are safe for our children. The people going there are fit for the purpose.
Well, very well said. I think that you mirror all of us as our sentiments on that issue. I'd like to go to the phone lines now and speak to Emmanuel Afo, who's a teacher. We spoke to him a little earlier on. Hello. So
Hi,
I mean, hi.
Yeah.
You've had Prof and you've had Doc on so many different issues. You know, why we are failing, what we can do to be better, what is required of us, value, entry, exit, all of that. I mean, what are your thoughts on how to move forward into a space where we have a good quality of teachers who are able to pass well and who can be trusted with our children?
Anyway, thank you for that question. And I thank the learned Prof and the other panel members in the studio. But I think that there's one question we are failing to answer, or maybe ask. And I say this without prejudice to the motive or the intention of the licensure exam. It's beautiful. It's going to read, for example, it's going to settle the debate as to who is qualified and who is not qualified. But anyway, who needs qualification to do what? And I'm saying this in a very gingerly way. I can tell you that between 80 to 85% of all teachers in primary and the JHS schools in Ghana are private school teachers. Now, you asked a question. Those who have sat the licensure exam for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times and have failed, what would they do? Winston said that they will find themselves in private schools anyway. The irony anymore is that in the last 15 years, statistically, students in primary school and JHS have done better than those students in the public schools who are supposed to have been trained by certificated teachers. Those are the questions you should be asking. Or anyway, is it not a fact?
Yes, that's the fact.
That private school students at the BCE level, at the primary school level, do better in terms of numeracy, in terms of literacy, than our public schools. So, apart from this situation that the licensure exam will solve, the entire value chain of education needs to be looked at critically. Look, Winneba was set up to do one thing and one thing only. And if I'm wrong, anybody can correct me. It was set up to train teachers. What is happening now? Anybody, can you answer the question? And I believe this is a question we all can answer. What is happening now? Now, regular students are going to do programs which are unrelated to teaching. And so we watered down the system. So I am looking at the fact that the licensure sounds fine, but I'm saying that the entire quality of education has reduced. And I don't know why we are failing to say this. We are failing to answer a critical question. If we think that the child should be at the center of our development, why are we not enacting policies that are forward-looking? And this business about sandwich and mature programs affecting the quality, I beg to differ. I disagree a little. If someone is not qualified, for example, if I am 30 and I go through a particular education system by virtue of the mature, how does that affect the kind of training I'm supposed to get while in the program? What you do is to tighten the screws in there so that even if my mature whatever gets me through, the system will actually fish me out. And that's why I'm saying that, look, during those days, from 1991, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, from 1991 to 1994, the kind of education we had in the colleges of education is not the same thing that is happening now. Look at the kind of education we have at a BEC level. Look at the kind of education we have at an SS level. Get a regular FHS student to write you a letter, and you'll be surprised. And so it is not just about the teaching and the quality of teachers coming down. The teaching profession has been made to serve as a last resort for those who have not been able to achieve their dreams. That should change. If you meet anybody who decided to be a teacher by virtue of the fact that he wanted to be or she wanted to be a teacher, the way they teach, the way they talk, it's totally different. It doesn't have anything to do with mature students or sandwich. Sandwich came in to serve a purpose. We didn't have enough universities. We thought that it was necessary to train people with a technical know-how. It doesn't mean you should water down something that is supposed to be happening. Anyway, I teach in a private school now. I taught in a public school for 10 years. And I realized that even as a teacher in a public school, there was no supervision anymore. A gentleman talks about continuous development. It is there. But go out there and ask what the second supervisors do when they go out there to train teachers. When they go, the first thing they get is their envelope. And I can be quoted anywhere. I went to a friend place as a teacher, spent 1 year, came to Adoso, spent 1 year, and I was in Koforidua. So this is something that is happening. The headmasters know this. The second supervisors will go to supposedly train teachers, and what they get is envelopes. And so even those in the system are not getting that continuous training that we are talking about. So what do you expect? Anymore, what do you expect? So I'm looking at the entire value chain, honestly. And I think that to deal with this particular problem, the specific problem we are talking about this morning, let the colleges of education get the authority to admit students themselves to read the various programs for which they want to go and teach outside.
All right. Prof was saying that that's actually what happens, Emmanuel, to your last comment. But let me say a very big thank you to Headmaster John for joining us, for Emmanuel Affo, who is a teacher who we just heard on the phones. And a thank you as well to our guest in studio, Dr. Christiana Daipoku, the Registrar for the National Teaching Council, and Professor Samuel Atintonu, who's the principal of Accra College of Education. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We've been thoroughly educated. I'm sure if there was a licensure exam on the topic this morning, we would definitely pass. And we hope that as time goes on, it gets better.